what is a good, healthy network experience, that's the one that comes to my mind every single time. But like I said in the chat, we'd love to hear yours, or if you have a story and you want to throw one out really fast, we want to hear what those stories are for you.
And I want to, so Randy, you say hanging out with Kevin Becht?
Oh, he's the best. Just hanging out with Kevin.
Only because of you, Randy.
All right, so Kevin, because he threw you under the bus, I'm gonna continue to do it more. So Kevin, what's one of your favorite networking experiences that you've had?
I've been sitting here trying to think because there's been a lot. One for every gray hair in my beard. I don't know. I share this story a lot, and I think it's when I was embraced by a network over 25 years ago during a transition of ministry because of the care that they gave. And I think in transitions, and as I shared that transition, I think even Doug Clark, I talked about our conversations on the phone around 20 years ago when it was another transition. And I think it was more, for me, it's more the relational connections that have come out of the network gatherings that rise to the top for me. But that's who I am. So more so than the events and the programs, because I mean, I can tell those stories too, but I think it's been those relational connections that have been the highlight more than anything else.
I think Cole echoes that in what he put in the chat as well. It's just this idea that, man, it's about coming together and holding each other accountable, yes, but it's also about having that brotherly bond, that we understand each other because we've gone through the same thing, and it's almost that war buddy mentality, right? That there's the good days and the hard days in ministry, and when we sit down across that table, we know they know what we've gone through, and they understand the choices and the hard moments that we've had, and we have that relationship that's deeper. I was just talking to my small group and my mentor last night, and we talked about this idea that discipleship is an intentionality of living life together, not necessarily hey, we're going to read the Bible together, or we're going to pray together, we're going to work on spiritual disciplines. It's more so the intentionality of living our life together and noticing when, hey, maybe we need a spiritual discipline to aid in this moment, but that's not the reason we meet together. It's the relationship, it's the life, and we help each other along the way. I think there's a lot of that comes in those relationships in this as well. But yeah, we're going to jump into our discussion today. And I'm going to introduce to you Steve Cullum. Steve is newer onto our team. Steve is going to be leading the discussion today with Randy, and I'll let him introduce Randy a little bit more. But we're going to jump in, and I'm just going to hand it over to Steve.
Thanks, Nick. So yeah, hey everybody. My name is Steve Cullum, and I am the Colorado State Coordinator for a national network of youth ministries. Been doing that as a volunteer for about 5 years, and just stepped into full-time doing that in February. So loving just the ability to connect with more and more youth pastors and youth ministry organizations around the state. And this idea of networking has been like so much of my DNA, like from my youth pastor when I was in high school. He was modeling it for me, and then I got it modeled for me by my youth ministry professor when I was in college, and just the networks that they provided around there. And so when I finally moved out of that sort of a world, I longed for connections, I longed for networking, and God provided people and it's been helpful for me so much. I mean, like Kevin, you talked about those relationships. Those are key. Like some of my best friends are also in ministry, and specifically youth ministry, and we just get each other, and it's awesome to have those connections. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about healthy networks. It's the 5 key areas of focus that NNYM is all about. So just a quick kind of reminder of what we've talked about so far. We've talked about discipling youth workers. We talked about every community, gospel sharing, widespread prayer, and today healthy networks. And so before we get into the discussion with Randy, just wanted to give you kind of quick explanation of what healthy networks really are about. When we talk about that, we mean that they're a community of youth leaders who do life and ministry together. So every youth leader in a discipling relationship, because we can't give what we don't have. If we're not in a discipling relationship, how are we going to be able to disciple teenagers and the leaders that we get to interact with as well? So we're working as an NYM, we're working with Fuller and the 10 by 10 and so many other initiatives to get students in discipling relationships. But how can we do that if we're not in one ourselves? And so we're given all these keys to spiritual lives of students, but how is our own spiritual journey? We need to make sure that we are in a healthy network so that we are being poured into, we're able to pour into each other and be discipled as well. So I mean, ultimately we can share all these things from books that we read and things like that, but it's so much more impactful when we have our own experience of like, this is what it's like when I get with my peers and I'm in, this life-giving relationship. Students, you should be doing the same thing as well. Fellow leaders, you should be doing the same thing as well. So essentially we're saying to students, follow me as I follow Christ. And then we need to be focused on that as well. So with accountability, encouragement, all those different things that come from a healthy network, we brought on our CEO and executive director of NNYM, Randy Davis. So Randy, thank you so much for being with us today to share your expertise and your experience. Before we jump into any questions around healthy networks, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about you, your history in ministry, but also your role here at NNYM.
Yeah, so thanks. I am honored to be a part of this, not because of any expertise, but because of just the love for what can take place. So I have been in ministry. January will start my 40th year, which is hard for me to fully grasp. But yeah, I started my 40th year of ministry in January. I've served several churches, worked with Youth for Christ for many years as well. The last 12 have been with the National Network, the last 4 in this role. Followed somebody that's really hard to fit into their shoes, but we definitely are standing on their shoulders. And Daryl, who's sitting down in that corner right over here for me, and grateful for him. And even previous to that, just Paul Fleischman and just some of the things that Paul established. Daryl was at the beginning of this as well, but to see the network grow for specific reasons, and it started with just getting guys to pray together for the lives of students. And man, it's just amazing to see how in the almost 43 years of our existence as an organization, how that just has continued to develop and grow. And so very grateful to be a part of that. I've had a blast serving in youth ministry. It's been great. I've had some wonderful experiences. I've had some very difficult experiences. One of the things that we are pretty clear with, even if somebody says, hey, what about working with you guys? We have an interview process, obviously, and the last one to talk to them is me. And I have one question. So tell me the story of the time that you've been burned in ministry, because we've all got those stories, unfortunately. And one of the things about a network is that you have people that understand the pain of youth ministry. I mean, there's joys. There's so much joy in youth ministry, but unfortunately, there's pain. Sometimes it's pain because you watch a student make a choice that you just have busted your tail to try and make sure that they never fall into that trap, but they did. Sometimes it's a pain, and sometimes a self-inflicted pain because we did something pretty stupid and wish we hadn't. And later we go, man, I'll never want to do that again. But then other times it's something that's been pushed upon us. That's just hard, difficult. Sometimes it's a conflict with leadership, conflict with a parent that's just livid over something that you did or didn't do, but it was all because of you. And my kids made a choice to tell us that we're not really following Jesus because of what you taught them. And, I don't know if you've all ever had that experience, but that's an interesting conversation. So there's just all kinds of different things, but to have the ability to be in youth ministry long term, to be able to serve somebody. I just got an email yesterday from a friend who's, hey, you need to read this story about this guy. He's 80 years old and still doing youth ministry. And so you just see those things and you just say, thank you, God. So look forward to just continue to be in that journey. So your previous question of just how we get started, this is kind of a thing for me. I love this. I've been a part of a network myself for over 30 years. And man, I cherish those guys.
That's good. Well, when we think of healthy networks, I mean, you kind of dived into it just a little bit there, but why do you see healthy networks, youth leader networks specifically, why are they so important? I know we were talking the other day and you mentioned kind of two main things of never feeling alone and getting more done. So could you dive into both of those things?
Yeah, never feeling alone is just a huge piece for me because youth ministry can be a lonely gig. I mean, it really can. If you're on staff at a parachurch ministry and you can get around the table with everybody else who's doing youth ministry like you are, you can celebrate things together really, really well. That's the piece where you don't feel alone. If you're the youth pastor of a local church, the unfortunate thing is you just came off a great youth weekend, a retreat somewhere, a camp somewhere, a mission trip. You come back in that next staff meeting, you're sitting there going, man, this was awesome. This was so great. Let me tell you about it. And they'll listen really intently. And then when you're done, they go, hey, that's great. Now we need to talk about Sunday. And it's not an intentional piece, not at all. But they've got everything else going on in their head of what needs to be done to keep things moving with the church. So it's not a negative, it's just a reality. And so sometimes as a youth pastor, you can feel so alone, even in your own congregation. Because how many times have you had adults come up to you and go, when are you going to get a real job? Right? Well, I have the most incredible job. You may have some kids that kind of ask the question, so where do you really work? I mean, so all these different pieces that can kind of create that sense of loneliness and as a youth pastor. Well, in the parachurch, we can get so focused inside that parachurch that we fail to connect with people outside the parachurch. And again, albeit because we got some good things going, but there's a miss when we don't hear something from somebody else. And sometimes because we're in that setting all the time, we see each other, but there's still a loneliness factor because we don't always understand something out of what we know as normal. I think some of the greatest joys is finding something that's a little abnormal. Okay, I'm a Young Frankenstein fan. I've got that. I've got a copy of that movie. I love that movie. I love the Abby Normal concept. I know it's an old movie, but man, I watch it all every now and then. I just pull it out just to watch it. But it's just one of those pieces of, if we can think something that's not always the same, because we get into that mix of always being the same, therefore we miss something that could be even greater. That creates a sense of loneliness because we're not experiencing something new or something fresh. But then the next step to that is more can get done when you do it together. I mean, that's a phrase that the business world has used forever. But it's not just the business world. It's what we can do. When I look at the high schools in my community. There are 2 high schools and both have about 4,000 kids in it. So 8,000 high school kids in this community. We have some great churches. We have Youth for Christ in the area, and they're doing a great job. We have Crew in the area. They're doing a great job. We have Young Life and FCA in the area. They're both doing a great job. But there is no way that the staff of those 4 ministries, plus all of the parachurch or all of the church ministries, there's no way that we alone could reach 8,000 kids. But with everything in me, that I believe this, together, we got a chance. For the sake of the gospel, we have a chance when we do that together. So when I started thinking about nationally, we have 67,000 high school and junior high campuses. We have 1,200 juvie centers with over 1 million kids incarcerated. We start thinking about the fact that there are 43 million kids between the ages of 10 and 19 in our country. Who thinks we can do that alone? Because you can't. But together, and we have nationally within NYM, we have over 130 organizations and denominations working together. When we do this together, we have a chance. God's bigger than anything we can ever dream of. And so in an instant, he could change everything for us. But if we just are faithful in doing things together, I believe with everything in me, we've got a chance. We've got a chance so that every student has a chance to hear the story of Jesus. So absolutely, we've got to do that together. So those are the 2 big reasons why I think network is so critically important. You should never feel alone as a youth leader. Never. And together, think of the impact that we could do for the kingdom if we do this together.
Yeah, that's so good. And we don't have enough time right now, but later on, you should stick around and ask Randy about a story about a basketball team and a basketball player that fits right in this whole thing. We'll skip over that now, but stick around later and ask him about that story for sure. Randy, what are some transferable principles that work in every network? Because we know we get it contextualized depending on we're in an urban society or a rural society, whatever, those different things, different parts of the country. But are there any transferable principles that work in every network or most networks?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest pieces is there has to be trust. One of the things that we always used to deal with early in my time with the local network was just building trust. So it was kind of fun. One of the greatest compliments we ever received was I was working with Youth for Christ, and a student came in, and she was just a little more cheery than usual. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. And so I asked her, why are you so happy? She goes, I just realized on my drive over here, I've got 4 youth pastors, and they all love me. And I'm going, okay, I know what church you go to. It's not that big. You don't have 4 youth pastors. She goes, no. I have you. I have my FCA director. I have my youth pastor, and I have the youth leader that isn't my small group leader. I have 4 youth pastors. And I sat there and honestly, I probably looked a little weird, but I started having some tears running down my face because I started to think, this girl has this concept that she knows she is not alone. And what impact can each of us have as we speak into her life? And we're not in that moment of going, well, no, she's my student and so I need to take care of her. No, because the 4 of us, we all knew each other. And we're like, we just care about the student, not claiming, put it that in quotes, and she's in my group. We used to have students that would jump from my youth ministry to somebody else's youth ministry. So we had a big thing on Sunday night. They had a big thing on Wednesday night. We had others that did a big thing on Thursday night. And so sometimes our kids would go with their friends to other things, to other youth ministries. And we just started laughing about it as youth pastors. And hey, I saw one of your kids the other night, and they were asking, I asked them what church, if they had a church, and they said, yeah, they were at your place. And, we're going, yeah, he's great. Love hanging out with him. We do all kinds of different things together. And the look in the students' eyes when you would have those conversations were like, you know them, you enjoy time with them. I mean, so it was one of those weird moments, but it was so much fun to watch because I had one of our church treasurer, love those conversations, but our church treasurer said one time, he goes, you spend a lot of money in your budget to hang out with your volunteers and then with all these other youth pastors. It makes no sense to me that you're doing that because it's almost like you're doing youth ministry so you can have fun with those folks. And I started laughing. I said, that's a great thought. If we're having fun together, then kids want to come because they want to be a part of something that's having fun. And so we started thinking about all the youth pastors in our community, and we would get together and we would have fun and we would do crazy things sometimes over a lunch or going to the school and just hanging out at the school together at the football games or wherever they might be. And we could have fun together. And the students saw that and they saw that we trusted each other. And it just changed the perspective that the students started realizing, this is a safe place.
Yeah.
Because these guys all seem to like each other. That's
kind
of a unique thing in a very divided world right now.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a huge piece. You got to build trust. That's just a principle that it doesn't matter what denomination you're from, what socioeconomic group you're from, what ethnic group you might be from. You got to build trust because that changes everything. I think another one is just simply that if you're going to build trust, one of the greatest things you can do is just, you got to care about each other. And the best way to do that is to pray for each other. Earlier, Kevin was mentioning things of relationship, and there's all kinds of stories that we can tell. I know for me, I would not be in ministry today if it wasn't for my network. I know that. I know full well that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today. Because back several years ago, had a very difficult situation. New senior pastor came in. We were not going to see eye to eye with each other. And in that tension moment, I knew I needed to step aside because he was the leader. He was the one the church brought in to be the senior pastor. In that mix, obviously I was a mess. My first call after telling Jama I had just resigned, which is my wife, and that was an interesting conversation. But then the second call was to some of the guys in my network. And to know how they came around me, to know that I didn't feel alone in that moment because they were there. And in turn, just to know that there were pieces where they were praying for me. I felt like I could face this because I wasn't facing it alone, because I had a team of people praying for me. And that was such a comfort for me to be able to keep moving forward. So it's just to know that you've got people that you can lean on. So there'll be times when I still, even today, will get a text from those guys that we were in a network together 30 years ago that are facing something, and they'll send me a text going, dude, just pray.
Yeah.
I just need you to pray right now. We're still doing life together, even though I'm the only one still in youth ministry. These guys all took demotions that became senior pastors or other pieces of life. Sorry, just joking. But we still do life together. A great story, Jim Burns. Some of you guys might know Jim. Jim has been in youth ministry forever, written, I don't know how many thousands of books, it seems like. But Jim has been a mentor for me. But I had lunch or dinner with him back a couple of years ago, and he made this statement to me. He goes, one of our youth, when I first started, we had this great network and it was wonderful. And one of our guys passed away. And it had been 30 years since I'd seen everybody else. But when I heard about it, I thought I need to go to that funeral. He said, I walked into that funeral, and who was there but all the other guys from that network of 30 years ago. And we started talking to each other, and it was like we never left 30 years ago, because we had done so much life together. we could continue to do life together. And we could stay in contact, and we could stay in the fact that we were doing this because we loved each other. And you do that because you pray together. I think another piece to all of that is, you just roll your sleeves up and do things together. Again, the events, that's not the critical thing of a network, but it's a good thing because we're doing something together. But watching students watch us work together was always just fun to watch. Just fun to watch. Because it just changes things. Again, students begin to see that this is different. Because in our world today, unfortunately, the divide is high and strong and growing. What would happen if we start seeing unity take place amongst youth pastors in a given community, amongst youth leaders in a given community, to say it's not about how many, butts are in the seats at my church or in my ministry, but they are in the kingdom.
Yeah. Yep.
What would start to change if we started trusting in the kingdom mentality and not my country mentality of my faith? And I just see that is the thing that we'll start to see things change.
Yeah.
I believe that. And to watch different pieces to that start to take place, where there's that trust, then you care about each other, so you pray for each other, and then you just roll the sleeves up and work together. And then you share the pieces of things you've learned. 40 years, but I've hung out with people that have forgotten more than I'll ever learn. What a great opportunity for me to sit in that network with them. Rusty's one of them. Rusty Kennedy's a great friend, and Rusty's doing all kinds of things. Now Rusty pastors a church, and yet he spends more time, it seems like, going to baseball games all across the country and taking somebody with him. He's got one of the youth pastors from our community who's on sabbatical. He took him with him to 2 games down in Cincinnati just last week because he knows the importance of youth ministry, right? So that's fun to watch. But in that mix, you just have this thing of, Rusty used to give us all kinds of different things. He was at a big church. He's a big Baptist church down the road here. And it's kind of funny because everybody brought something together. Even at the events, everybody brought something together. Rusty was the organizer. I was one who spoke. We had another guy who was an incredible musician and had a great youth band. So they came. So everybody brought to the table something different that they did well and shared that with the rest of us. Because, man, you certainly do not want me to try and pick up a guitar. That would be ugly. In turn, the organizational skill that Rusty brought made sure that we had everything that we needed. And then somebody else who had just a connection with someone who could put together a great sound system that we could travel with. Okay. And then others had vans and buses, and we could just throw kids into those. I mean, it was just all these different pieces that everybody was bringing together, all the different things, resources, whatever, that they could use. And so we look at those 4 things really quickly. We talk about relationship, trusting relationship, prayer, doing ministry together, and then the sharing of the resources. That's just critical aspects. And those are fundamental pieces that for years have made a healthy network.
Cool. Yeah, those are huge for sure, and we're going to get a chance to talk about that in just a little bit in our groups. But yeah, thank you so much, Randy, for joining us today and sharing from your heart, sharing your vision, sharing your expertise as well and your experience. Man, healthy networks are so important, but they don't always come necessarily easy. So we're going to get a chance to talk about that in our groups and everything. So I'm going to pass it off to Josiah.
Feel free to pause the video here and think through these questions yourself, or with the group that you're viewing this with. When you're ready, unpause to hear more of the conversation and the takeaways from the youth workers that joined us live.
So our leadership team met yesterday, and we decided to take our roster, which has about 66 people on it, and divide the members between the leadership team, and we each took between 6 and 8 people that we're going to communicate with on a more personal basis, inviting them to the meetings, trying to develop a personal relationship with them, that would encourage them then to come to the meetings and maybe bring a friend or whatever. And so just to try and like build relationship, deepen trust. That's what we're trying. We just started it.
In our conversation, Isaac, you were commenting about the just the balance between task and relationship kind of stuff. And you've been doing this for a while. What is it you found in regard to that and creating an engaging environment?
Yeah, when I first started my network up in Roseville, I was very much task oriented and bringing in speakers and working on training and things like that. And a few months in, some of the guys that were coming said, "Hey, we don't really want another meeting. We want to just come and hang out and get to know each other and just make it more organic." So I started doing that. So now here in Merced, definitely more relationship based, but now we do 2 events together a year. One is a big outreach at the very beginning of the school year, or right when the summer ends, called Rally in the Valley. And then for the first time last March, or in March, we did a discipleship event together. So they're both 6 months in between each other. So the Rally in the Valley, then 6 months, then a discipleship event, then 6 months in the Rally in the Valley. So we're going into our 2nd year now of doing that. And I think it provides a good balance, because most of the months are relational and connection. But then when you get about 2 months out from the event, you still have the relationship part, but you kind of focus a little bit more on, hey, you need to do this and I do this for this event. And then you put the event on together, which continues to build that trust and that camaraderie and that connection. So I think we have a good balance now.
That's cool.
And Doug, you were mentioning we've got a youth pastor in our neck of the woods that is like, I get all my relationships filled up. I want to do something. So
if they're in a multi-staff situation, their quiver's pretty full sometimes. But a person who's working alone, it's life when they get together for that once a month meeting. I've been in both situations.
But even when you're on staff at a larger church where you have multiple staff within the youth ministry department, I mean, sometimes you need to have a conversation that if you would share it with somebody within your own circle, that could come back and bite you. I mean, just to be up front and blunt. Sometimes you just need to have one of those gut honest conversations with somebody, and in some ways that might be to kind of get it out so that I can realize my own kind of craziness that I'm thinking, but just to be able to express that to somebody who isn't within that tight knit circle, so that there can be a way of venting, perhaps you could call it. I don't want to go so far as to say it's gossip, because I don't think it is. I think it was just more one of those things of just being able to unload it. I think somebody just wrote in the chat, you can't unring the bell. Right. If you share that with somebody within that circle, it very well could come back to bite you. But just to be able to have enough trust in someone. And so even the bigger churches that I've talked to, and I've just asked that question. So who is it that you really kind of let the guard down and say what you really think and feel? Can you do that on your staff? And they're going, well, mostly, but maybe not all the time. And so it's one of those pieces of being able to have that somebody outside. Plus, again, it's new ideas. If we keep doing the same thing all the time, we're going to get the same result all the time. So if we can hear from somebody who's in a different world that sees the context differently, that's going to benefit it as well.
For sure. I think that's my main takeaway here, is that trust piece. That trust piece is so huge that one of the things that we do usually at the end of these conversations is, what's your one takeaway? Like, there's a lot of information that we're picking up in this and a lot of really good things, but can you narrow it down to what's the one thing you need to take away from today? And go and write that in the chat, because your one takeaway might be something someone else in this room did not hear. For me, it was the concept when Randy was talking that, hey, trust is really important. What does trust lead to? Non-compete attitude. What does non-compete attitude lead to? The kingdom mentality first and foremost. That when you see a student, it's about that student and their faith that's in front of you, that where they need care, rather than are they in my group or are they in that group, or is there 2 youth pastors pouring into them? What could that look like? It reminded me of one of my favorite moments that started to become a habit of the sister church that we kind of called it up the hill from my church, that when families had conflict, they seemed to ping pong between those 2 churches. And a lot of times the students were caught in the midst of, I want to stay at this youth group, but my parents are making me go over there, or maybe they're in a divorced home and one weekend they're here and one weekend they're there. But when we had that trust because of our network, what happened was when I heard, oh, you're from that church? Oh, awesome. Hey, can you tell Lonnie hi? He's an amazing dude. I love Lonnie. You know what? Why don't we take a picture together and text it to him right now and bug him that you're over here? And we kind of joke about, it's like you said, Randy, wait, you know him? Yeah, I know Lonnie. We get lunch every month. We're good friends. And that kid, you would see that weight of the pressure of, it's not my choice where I'm going right now. So, no, okay, you guys trust each other. And that kid was then cared for. And then when we had that text with that picture, that was a reminder to me, hey, I need to sit down with Lonnie and say, hey, we've got this kid that we both share. How are we walking alongside to support them first and foremost in their faith? How do we make sure that they get the best picture possible rather than us fighting over? Right? And that was such a cool thing to me. So what are your takeaways? We're going to see those, but like I said, write it in that chat group. So Steve, you're writing what? The balance of relationship and doing ministry together equals strong networking. Kevin needs to build trust with individual members in his network outside of meeting time. That's huge. Outside of meeting time, it's we've talked about this before in a lot of things, right? Or if you go to GLS ever, it's the meeting after the meeting that makes the most importance. It's that after your network lunch in the parking lot, standing next to each other's cars, and that little bit of, hey, I saw this, and where does that go, and how can I care for you a little bit deeper? Isaac, we are having a saying. We have a saying in our youth group. We don't care about what youth group we go to. We just care about that you go to a youth group. It's all about the kingdom. I think that's huge. We've said this on our staff. Leave your egos at the door. It used to be leave your egos and your logos at the door. I think there's an importance to saying like, hey, I'm proud of my group. I'm proud of what we do, but also knowing, hey, we can set those kind of things at the door to say what's the most important for the kids and for the students and for those in front of us is huge.
I think if I could interject something or
Yeah.
everything that was mentioned has little to do with network as meeting. Has everything to do as network as relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a mentality that we unfortunately can fall into the trap of. Well, network is meeting. No. Network is relationship. And I think that's the critical factor of when we flip that switch, it changes everything of the network.
Huge. Hey, I want to thank you guys for joining us today and being part of the discussion and the conversation here. We are going to, I'm going to pray for us. Then after we pray, we are going to stick around for about a half hour longer if you guys want to continue the conversation. I think, Steve, you've mentioned that Randy's got a bonus story for us in that after time frame. So if you want to hear what that was, stick around for that. But before we jump into prayer and sign off, I want to update you on some things coming up and a little bit of announcement time. The first thing is this is the conversation space where we can really talk with each other and engage with each other. There's another space that we're talking the same topics that's a little bit less involved with that it's our free refills podcast. It's one of the things that I listen to when I'm on the treadmill or if I'm in my car. It's not a conversation as much as just a place to just be refilled and refueled in youth ministry in a way that pours into your heart. So if you use any podcast site or service, if you just search free refills, it will pop up on there. Another podcast you might want to give a try and a listen, because you heard Steve and his ability to kind of lead a discussion and host today. Steve runs the Student Ministry Connection podcast. You can also get that on any of the major podcasting sites as well by searching Student Ministry Connection. So check that out and give a listen to his podcast as well. Our next network conversation scheduled for July is not happening. We're taking a break. It's summer. We know you're busy, so we're taking a month off, and we'll be back in August to talk over praying together in our networks and the importance of prayer in networking. So don't miss that. Again, that's the second Tuesday of August at 9 a.m. Pacific. So we'd love to have you guys join us for another conversation there. And the last piece is our network leaders training is August 22nd. So here's what I want to say on that. If you are part of a network and you don't see yourself as the leader of the network, still come to the network leaders training. It's always great to have a second voice in the room that says, hey, I know what we're about and how can I help you lead this forward? If you're someone who's been to a network leaders training and you go, yeah, I've already done that. Maybe you want a refresher on, hey, what are our priorities? What are our focuses? What are we about in networking? It's great to have that refresher in that. And then third, we always want to bring someone else along. So if you're somebody that's been a part of doing this and you're like, man, I want someone in my network to hear the vision a little bit deeper so that we can be moving and pulling together in this at the same effort. Think of someone that you might want to invite to the network leaders training and say, hey, I'll go to it again with you so we can discuss it afterwards. It is really, really important that we're all understanding the vision and the picture that we're doing in our networks together. So that training is August 22nd. If you are interested in doing that, do me a favor and right now open up the chat and say, Kevin, email me. Kevin's going to reach out to you and make sure you get all of the Zoom information, that kind of stuff. If you just drop it in the chat right now, I want to be in that network leaders training. We'd love to have you there. But why don't you guys join me in prayer? And we'll wrap this up today. Thank you for being a part of this. God, I just am so thankful for, as I think I counted 9 states represented on this call today. A lot of California and a lot of different regions in California that could probably be considered 10, 12 different states when we add all that space and all those people in. And the reach of this call goes so much further than what we might realize, because the 20 people that are in here in this room are spread out across the country in different networks. Each one of those networks has different people, different churches, different organizations represented. Each one of those people have so many students underneath them that are listening and hearing the importance of being in a community, in relationship with others, that we are better together, that this faith, this life is not meant to be done alone. I'm so thankful that Randy reminds us that, man, the biggest killer of this ministry is feeling lonely, that we can come together, support each other, and move forward in what you're calling us to do for your kingdom. Not our own churches, not our own organizations, not our own wills and desires, but the kingdom first. God, we just pray that this conversation goes beyond us to all of the people that we influence, that we can see that we can be networked together in relationship, in community, in faith, in discipleship, in a way that represents you and your love well. We thank you for Randy and Steve and their wisdom as they guided us this morning. We thank you for the conversations that we had in small groups. And God, we just pray that this goes farther than we can ever imagine. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
Thanks for viewing this network conversation, brought to you by the National Network of Youth Ministries. We hope it helps you to set the table for unity and further conversations with other youth leaders. Any shared links are in the comment section on NNYM's YouTube channel. While you're there, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to join our next conversation or training, you can find upcoming live events on our Eventbrite page. You can also connect to a local network leader at nnym.org. We're here because we are better together.